Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL efforts. Good morning, Gamecock fans. Welcome into coffee. This is J.C. Sherbert. Today is Wednesday, March 19th, the year of our Lord 2025. Certainly, as always, happy to be with you today. Several things to talk about. The start of spring football practice, since this is coffee's kind of football focused in a lot of ways. And so we're going to talk some football. Are you ready for some football? You know, remember that? That was, I guess that's still going on, Hank, for Monday Night Football. It's been a minute since I've really sat down and watched Monday Night Football since my pro team, the Bears, my new pro team, used to be a Falcons fan. Still am to a certain extent, but they were terrible last year and didn't make many watch parties, and it was just a lost season for Chicago, but they're doing better. Anyway, you didn't come here to listen to me yammer on about the Bears because I have a lot of complaints, about them. And that's not for this audience. But spring football starts today. Going to kind of give a broad overview, a big picture look at it. We've previewed it to death, to be honest. If you think about the bigspur.com and the shows and all that, it's always, what are the keys? They're very simple keys this year, but there's a lot of them as far as spring practice goes. But keep in mind, spring practice is not a deadline. It's not oh my God, if they're not this by the spring game, they're going to lose. And it's a process, just like most sports. The thing with college football is you don't have a lot of evidence, I guess, heading into a season because there's no spring, no scrimmages against other teams, no practices against other teams, even though, hey, I'm kind of hopeful Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, may start saber rattling a little bit, and maybe you can get a combined practice. I think that would help. They do that in the pros, man, and that really helps a team probably get better more than an exhibition game, I think, because you can go good on good. You can do scenarios, and it's against an opponent. So you're not playing against yourself out there. I really like that idea from Deion Sanders. You close it up. You don't have to talk about it. Some things will leak out, but when you play an actual scrimmage game and keep score and all that, I think inevitably some coach is going to get fired for losing the exhibition. And that wouldn't be good. But yeah, I'd like to see that happen. I think the pros do it well, and it's amazing to me that at that level of football and at every other level of football, they understand the importance of getting a live look against another opponent prior to playing actual games. And in college football, we just don't. High school. Shoot, I remember, you'd have a scrimmage against somebody else where you just kind of went out there and practice pads, kind of like a combined practice. Or they'd come to you, you go to them. Then you'd usually have like a jamboree game where you played a couple of quarters. I like the jamboree idea for football, college football, by the way, if you're looking to raise funds. And then if you lose a 2-quarter game, you can always say, if you're going to get fired over it, which will happen, once the buyouts all go down, right? But it's you could say, oh, we had another half to play, that kind of thing. You're doing 7-on-7 against other teams all summer. I just, in the pros, I mentioned combined practices, all that good stuff. So I don't, college football is a serious outlier when it comes to that, in my opinion. I don't know how they do it. That's why you have some sloppy openers and teams get a lot better by October. They change completely. I just, I think if you're going to do all this stuff and try to milk every penny out of the fans and milk every penny out of the television contracts and the season and all that, you owe it to the quality of the product to have better preparation, right? Wouldn't you think? I mean, that's common sense to me. Uh, I think from our perspective, there's no way in Hades they're going to let the media into a combined practice, and they certainly aren't going to let fans in. So I don't know that it matters to us other than having intel to go on and guesses and sort of like those secret scrimmages in basketball. Although South Carolina beat the tar out of NC State in the secret game this year, and that didn't tell us much, right? Maybe told us a little bit about NC State because they fired a coach after going to the Final Four. But you know, I don't see the downside to that other than injuries, and I just don't. And injuries are just part of it. If every other level can do it, you know, why not? And I think some of the injuries in college football when the games get started may be because you don't get a lot of prep. Because when you're a coach and you're going team on team, you kind of hold your breath whenever you go full go, and you're kind of thudding at times, not tackling to the ground. So your body, if it's not used to that, you're more susceptible to injury. It's all about preparation. And like I said, if they're going to try to cash in on all this, they owe it to everybody out there, including the players, to get them ready and to use some common sense. That's a big word in today's society because some of it lacks, and that's in everything these days. I blame the internet. That's a funny saying. I'm a Gen Xer, right? And so we're all. I think this generation kind of sits back and observes and chuckles and all that with the other ones, millennial, Gen Z, boomers. At times, it's a smaller generation, that kind of stuff. I don't think Gen X is going to have a president. Maybe not. We'll see. So far, no. But that's political. I mean, but us Gen Xers, we're kind of, I find it funny because you see these Gen X memes on Instagram and things, and it's like, oh, we're the last generation to play outside and all this stuff. And we had Blockbuster Video and all this good stuff. So it's kind of funny. Um, but yeah, I don't know why I got sidetracked on that. But anyway, yeah, common sense. So I think we kind of think we wrote the book on common sense. I don't know that that's true. I think there are people with common sense in all generations and people with none. And the people that run college football really don't. I mean, it's a mess, man. It's all this stuff, these changes all at once, and I tell you, the people that run college, they don't care. They're chasing dollars, and it's like you hear from athletic directors and commissioners and stuff. They're loudly complaining about needing money. I'm like, your desire to make more money is why you're in this mess, and your greedy desire to hoard all the money you were making is why this happened. And now you want more money? And that's a general statement about the sport. It has nothing to do with South Carolina. You guys know, and gals know, I support NIL at South Carolina. I encourage everybody, for that matter, to go to GamecockCoffee.com, buy coffee to help they need funds. Join Garnet Trust. It's $10 a month. They have a special with Underdog Fantasy right now where you download it and, put in the code 1801 and spend $10. The collective gets $150. It's like giving the collective $150 to go play a game for fun. I mean, I could list that. I could talk about that all day and the need for it at Carolina because that's just a fact of life and I care. But all this stuff where it's like, okay, so you know, we're taking the spring games off television too. That was a big note yesterday. And look, it's not something I personally am going to stand on the table and complain about. It is something that I feel bad for, like the fans that are out of state, that pull for Carolina that, just absolutely cannot make it to Columbia that weekend. Because I think they enjoy. I mean, you see it on YouTube, thousands of views of the tapes of the spring game, and you enjoy watching your team, right? And watching your team more than a highlight video. Like, so the SEC gave the teams choices. You can either have your spring game televised, or You can let us send a camera crew in there and do a 30-minute special for programming. And that's going to be watched pretty, but you're not going to be able to like really dig into it. It's going to be quick cuts and interviews and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm happy to watch it. I think it'll be great. And it will get people fired up about Gamecock football. But it's not the same as a spring game because a lot of us out here, us, I say us because I enjoy looking at the spring game tape. I'm going to go to the game, so I will get some benefit out of it, I guess. If you go read my thoughts from the spring game last year, there were a couple players I was like, hey, they got a really good chance, and they never played redshirted and got in the portal as soon as the season was over. That's Braswell, DJ Braswell, and Tyshawn Russell. Never played. So what do I know? There were some other players that I thought would be really good, and I was right about those. But I think back to the original topic of being prepared for the season. I think you owe it to a sport you've taken a lot from and tried to squeeze blood out of a turnip financially in many ways, to give the coaches and players a look, just like they do at every other level of football. I mean, in high school and in pro, even in junior high, you would not dream of going and playing a first game without having a scrimmage or something. Even in weird Illinois, right, where they don't actually have full pad jamborees or anything like that, they practice all summer. It's weird, like all summer, full practices. It's strange. And then they play each other, and they kind of have a spring game the week before the season, showcase scrimmage or whatever, but they're still going out doing 7-on-7 against other schools, lineman challenges against other schools, the lineman things in shells. 7-on-7 is obviously not in pads, but you're always getting a look at somebody else, and in college you just don't. It's like taboo. Now there have been instances where players will get together from their friends from other schools and run 7-on-7 and player-led workouts in the off season. That's fine. But man, it's not the same. So anyway, that was a little discussion to start off with about the absolute BS that the NCAA continues to implement on college football while at the same time trying to milk every penny. And when I say the NCAA, I'm talking about collectively the presidents and commissioners and conferences are much more powerful these days than the actual NCAA. And I appreciate. I think Greg Sankey's done things the right way for the most part in the SEC. There's things I don't agree with him, but I think compared to other commissioners who have these bi-coastal conferences and just to hell with tradition. We're going to try to get every point in the Nielsen ratings that we possibly can and every dollar we possibly can. Sankey's kind of added two schools that made sense. That were contiguous. I mean, like I've said before, the SEC with South Carolina got in the SEC with Arkansas. The original hope was Texas and Florida State would join the league when they went to 12. So it's been Texas not wanting to come. It's not like, this is a new thing. Well, let's go steal Texas. I think there are butthurt people with that, like in the Big Ten, because I think they actually fancied them, like Texas. And then I'll get into spring practice and other Gamecock stuff in a second. But I do want to say this about Texas. Texas is just like North Carolina in this, and I have a lot of friends that are Texas fans. They're, God, some of my favorite people on earth, and I don't pull against them. I don't, along with the burnt orange that's shade of orange. It doesn't bother me, right? I don't hate Texas. I like Matthew McConaughey. The city of Austin seems fun. I've only been there once, but it's nothing against them at all. Happy they're in the SEC, but they have operated like North Carolina in a lot of ways through the years. And if you notice, North Carolina is not throwing its. I say that in NCAA basketball tournament, but North Carolina and all the ACC football talk and stuff. They were kind of just took a back seat to everybody else, and they don't necessarily get their votes and stuff. But Texas operated like they ran the show. Okay. And they have always fancied themselves back when they were talking about going to the Pac-12 as this superior academic flagship school. They created their. They think they're Notre Dame, and they do have a ton of fans. One of their previous athletic directors who got fired decided he was going to expand the Texas brand into China, which was weird. I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe. I mean, financially, yeah, but don't you? Do you have enough money at Texas? But and it was told to me 20 years ago. Number one, academics. They don't want to go into academics. They feel like they're more of a Pac-12 or Big Ten school for their culture. Number two, they've got it good in the Big 12 because they run the show. And then number three, and this is said off the record, they just don't want any. They don't want to have to deal with that, the toughness of the schedule and stuff. But obviously, it's a big chess piece, with expansion. And then everything changes. We go into this revenue share. We start seeing massive TV deals. The Longhorn networks failing. The Big 12. I mean, and then they're in, right? So they've always fancied themselves as being aligned with the alliance, the dead Pac-12. Uh, Way to go good job joining the alliance, Pac-12. Good job, following around your big brother all 100 years. It caused your demise. Um, and the ACC, they would never join the ACC, but they fancy themselves as that type of institution, right? Oh, well, far superior to Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Alabama. Oh. I think that's always a bunch of bunk. But anyway, so I think the Big Ten was a little butthurt because they thought they were getting him, and so they lashed out and threw a tantrum. It's like, I'm so mad that you got Texas that I'm just going to go kill my brother, the Pac-12. Wow, you're messed up in the head. That's all a metaphor, folks. It's a joke. It's a metaphor. Anyway, so yeah, I want to tell you real quick before we dive into spring practice with the Gamecocks, and I'll quickly remind you guys of some other stuff. Want to give a shout out to my good friends at Palmetto Golf and Belts. Brandon, big Gamecock fan. Man, it's golf season, and those handcrafted belts. They have towels, they have gloves, they have tees. And it's all a great price, and it's just custom stuff that looks really sharp. A friend of mine on thebigspur.com, not a friend of mine, or one of our members on thebigspur.com said the other day he ordered some belts and they were there in like 2 days. Man, I've got a St. John's sweatshirt I'm sweating to get by the time my watch party comes around. Although I don't know, St. John's isn't playing on Friday, but that's my team I'm repping. And I ordered it from Amazon and got the expedited shipping. This is a local group and they send it right to you. So go to palmettogolfing.com. That's Palmetto Golf and Belts. Get you a belt, get you a glove, get you a towel. Be looking sharp for the right price during golf season, those of you that do it. All right. So the Gamecock spring practice, now that I've had my rant there, lots to do. There's a lot to talk about with regards to that. I will tell you real quick before I forget this. South Carolina won in baseball last night at Segra Park, 4-3 over College of Charleston. Good pitching performance, especially a couple guys out of the bullpen late. Ugly game at the plate. All I can say is, yeah, because College of Charleston walked in 2 runs and then Carolina scored the winning run on a balk. Weird, huh? All I can say is better than the alternative because I think Charleston's won that game a couple of times at Segra with Chad Holbrook leading that program. They're very good. They're going to be really good this year as well. But 4-3, so the Gamecocks are now 17-5. They go to Arkansas this weekend. I think first pitch is at 7:30 Eastern from Baum Stadium in Fayetteville on SEC Network Plus. The women's basketball team, the women's basketball team tips off, of course, 4 o'clock on ESPN against Tennessee Tech on Friday in their first round March Madness game. And North Carolina won last night in men's basketball, 95-68 over San Diego State. And then Alabama State, the Hornets. I like Alabama State. Last second shot to beat the most terrifying mascot other than Purdue Pete in the field today. Glad to see St. Francis out. Go look at their mascot. Go look at Chief Sports Net on Instagram. Scroll down. We have a picture of the mascot. Oh, God. Terrifying. Terrifying. So I'm glad they're out. I won't have any nightmares. Spring practice. Oh, so it gets started today. And look, I think that after listening to Shane Beamer's press conference, doing some digging, I think that this is a team right now it's the big the P word, but the right kind of P word, right? Because there's a lot of P words, right? Uh, Potential. There's a lot of potential here. This is like whereas last year's team was an older football team, this is a younger football team. Even if you look in the transfer portal, there are players that are probably going to play key roles this year. And I'm looking at Justin Okoronkwo and Jalen Brown that have a lot of eligibility left. You know, they're just like class of 2024 players. Even with the transfer portal these days, you're going to have years like that because the portal is not necessarily a bunch of one and done players. It's usually, ideally, you're filling gaps in all of your classes, right? You're getting a couple of redshirt freshmen, some sophomores, some juniors. Um, as you look at who you have on your roster and you've lost or not signed people or whatever at different positions. So that's kind of the formula for it. Whereas when you go junior college player, back in the day when you went JUCO heavy, like at Kansas State and Mississippi State, you really had to get the right guys because you're looking at a 2-year turnover constantly. That's not always the case with the transfer portal. It is some places, but not a lot of others, or not some others. So that's the case there. But the portal does skew young. There are only a couple that don't have eligibility beyond this year in this year's portal class. They're not done. Wide receiver, there's a lot of chatter out there, national media and whatnot, about they're going to be hot and heavy for a receiver in the portal. They're not. I'm just telling you right now. They're not. Nope, not. If one falls in their lap, so to speak, just like with Justin Okoronkwo, they weren't going to take another linebacker. But if one falls in their lap, yeah, 6'4" guy that can go up and get it, yeah, they're gonna do that. But honestly, even local reporting on it, even maybe on the Big Spur a little bit, there's been some speculation about at least one writer that's not happening. So don't be disappointed or think that they failed if they don't go get this big time receiver in the next portal window. What they do wants a defensive tackle. And I feel good about their chances there. Reported that yesterday in the VIP football scoop on thebigspur.com, which you can join for $1 now. Nevertheless, so they're not quite done. This is a young group. This is a young team. And after last season, how close Carolina was, how good they were on defense, how much the offense improved. You wonder about I don't want to say hype, but the raised expectations for this program because you start looking down the list. I mean, it's almost unprecedented because I'll tell you this right now, folks. I can't remember an offseason in the history of Carolina football. All right, so maybe 2014, but that offseason, Carolina was top 10. They made a movie about Spurrier. Spurrier infamously made the comment outside of Lamont Paris saying Cam Scott will be all SEC. Worst take of the year was Spurrier going, "Oh, we're going to be better on defense next year." Uh, you know, Worst take of the decade, or I guess beyond. We're past a decade now. Worst take ever. That and. But hey, look, coaches that just shows you, folks. Coaches don't get it right all the time either. It's when you're dealing with human beings and things like that. It may not be what you think it is. Everybody makes mistakes, I guess is my point there. But really, in 2014, that was one side of the ball that had to replace a lot of players. I mean, and Clowney, not just Clowney, everybody else. Losing Victor Hampton and Kelsey Quarles, early mistake. They didn't get drafted, but that could have helped them and helped that defense. And maybe it was the difference in Carolina winning the East because the offense was really good. So with that team, you looked at the offense, and it ended up being one of the better offenses in program history. Dylan Thompson set a single season passing record. They could run the ball. You had Mike Davis and Brandon Wilds and a good offensive line. The defense was horrible. And and I think everybody just took everybody's word for it. But if you looked at the players that they were trotting out there, it was almost like, oh, I hope these guys are good, and they weren't ideal. They had some games that they were, they fought hard, but so that was an off season that, you know, maybe you were dealing with some personnel losses. I think to a lesser extent there were some expectations the last time Carolina went 9-4 under Will Muschamp going into 2018. You kind of thought, well, they were very young last year. You got everybody back. You know, Debo Samuel's healthy. And offense that year was pretty good. The defense lost DJ Wanham. He was in and out of the lineup with injuries all year, and they just didn't have a lot of depth and a lot of youngsters back there. And I think the thought then was, well, it's a Will Muschamp team. They're going to be fine on defense. And they ended up, by the end of the season, being horrible. And that was that. That was a set. Those were two 7-6 teams, though. They got the postseason. It's not like they were losing records, but replacing the personnel proved to be a challenge. Well, this year, let me just break this down for you guys. Okay, the entire front seven other than Dylan Stewart gone. A first round pick at safety, Nick Emenwari, gone. 3-year starter. A likely NFL pick at corner, O'Donnell Fortune, gone. The kicker is gone. The punter, gone. The snapper, gone. The holder, who was also the punter, gone. 2 starting offensive guards, gone. Veteran starting center, gone. Leading receiver and starting tight end, gone. Leading rusher and starting running back, gone. And that's just the starters. So how many is that? 3, 6. That's like 9 major things, probably take 10, 11 players that are gone. So you have to replace them. And so that's why the roster and the team is flipping from pretty old. Carolina, I think, led the country in seniors last year to relatively young. Beamer used the young word. Young is not an excuse. And I'll point this out. I think I've said it here on Coffee before or on some show. I've written it. Clemson, and look, I'll use Clemson as an example. There's 2 reasons I use Clemson as an example. Number one, I know no matter what you people say, you're watching Clemson games when you can and pulling against them. So you know their players, you're familiar. Most of you, not all of you. Some of you are, fight the good fight and don't watch them. Don't contribute to their television ratings and their value. But I think that, so that's a good point of reference when you're trying to kind of make a point. Number 2, they're really the only program, and Oregon is in this category as well, but Oregon kind of started building towards where they are now in 1977. It took Rich Brooks 17 years. They got to the Rose Bowl, and then Mike Bellotti got a little further. Chip Kelly got at the title game, left Helfrich with a team that got to the title game. And then they had Willie Taggart for a year. And, of course, that was one of their worst years. He did get better than Helfrich. And then Mario Cristobal and now Dan Lanning, and they're back knocking on the door. And that's a breakthrough program because they just were not very good prior to that long build that Rich Brooks undertook at Oregon. And then everybody built on it. Clemson, though, although they did win a national title in 81, that was a program before Dabo Swinney took over that had not won the ACC in 20 years until 2011. They didn't win their first division title until '09. Um, they were they were not bad. Clemson was usually pretty good, a pretty winning SEC ACC football team. But the results of their seasons under Tommy West and Ken Hatfield after the first year, and Tommy Bowden were very similar to Dave Dorn at NC State. Just being honest. I mean, that was kind of what they were. Dorn's NC State. Um, Not so many 6-win seasons, but a lot of 7, 8, nines. And they got they broke back through, kicked the door in, so to speak, right? And if you look at their 2014 team, which finished the season really well, beat Carolina finally, won a bowl, and they did have some key players back. That next year, Dabo started talking about how young his roster was, and I was like, "Oh, come on!" But they were. If you looked at the players that were playing, there are a lot of young and talented guys, and that's kind of what in 2015, and that set them up for 16 when they won it all. And then they lost to Sean, and then 17 came around. Kelly Bryant, they were still really good, made the playoff, and they recruited behind Trevor. Away we go, right? We don't need to get into Clemson's rise in the last decade. But that's they were young, but that 15 team, they didn't blow everybody out. They didn't blow Carolina out. They had some close games, but they won. And expectations were high that offseason, despite being young, because they replaced the players that they lost. And in many cases, that they had guys that were, I think, a little better, a little more talented. So Carolina, I think if they want to break through as a program, and that was kind of the focus of a coffee episode last week, this is an opportunity to say, hey, look, it's not South Carolina's not a flash in the pan. They're not a one-hit wonder. They're not a, hey, the stars aligned for us to go 9-4. No, I mean that you never want to say that. Um, Although I think in the SEC, as tough as it is, sometimes the stars did align for us to go 9-4. But yeah, South Carolina last year, realistically, they were close in those games. They did not have the benefit of a schedule like Missouri, which won 10 again, or Texas, which had the playoffs. I mean, they played a reasonably tough schedule. Wasn't the toughest in the league, wasn't the weakest, but it was tough. It was always cracked up to be, in my opinion. I mean, that was a legit football team that got better, found a way to win down the stretch, and then had an unfortunate bowl game. But there were a lot of older players, a lot of veterans. I mean, Nick Eamon wore a 3-year starter. I mean, he had started. I mean, he was old by the time he left. Old in football years, right? And some of the guys with extra the COVID year or whatever. Some of those guys have left. There's very few remaining. I think Ja'Kai Moore is maybe one of the only one. Maybe there's another. And that made teams older. So in college football, though, college basketball, I think in the NCAA tournament, you want to be young. Oh, I mean, sorry, old. You want to be an older team. Older teams win the tournament. Older teams are usually pretty good. College football, you can be young. It's better to be old, like on the lines of scrimmage, especially offense, I think, because offensive line's so much about snaps and experience and development. You would rather be old at quarterback, but you can be young at positions too if you're good, right? And I think coaches sometimes will use that, and Beamer won't. If Beamer says if they lose a game, oh, we're a young team, then look, that's what it is. It is what it is. I don't think that they're setting anything up for excuses, but it's going to be young. It's going to be a young football team this year with a lot of inexperienced guys at key positions. The good news is, unlike 2014, and hopefully unlike 2018, and there's more talent on the defense coming back to Carolina, maybe not returning starters, but overall talent than Muschamp had in 2018, where you had some guys that you had to kind of replace. Like I said, DJ Wanham was a junior, got hurt. There were some freshmen playing. I think so. it's this is a different situation as far as what you got on the roster. You just have guys that haven't played, and you may start two redshirt freshmen at linebacker. Just being honest, Fred Johnson and Justin Uncle may be the two starting linebackers, and they are redshirt freshmen. Sean Murphy's in the mix. That kind of Jerron Willis is a veteran, and you'll still have true freshmen like Donovan Darden, like Fred Johnson did last year, factoring in. You do have some veterans elsewhere, and it's not hopeless up front. I really don't know how young they'll be, but you got guys that haven't necessarily been counted on as starters like Goodwine and Barrett. Gabriel Brownlow Dindy hasn't played a whole lot. Devontae Miles is coming in. Depending on if they get from the portal, there's that. At end, you're going to be opposite Dylan Stewart, pretty young, with the exception of Brian Thomas Jr. Desmond Umazulu is going into his third year. But you have more talent. I think raw talent. Raw talent doesn't always win. Because you have to develop it and all that good stuff. So there's a lot to be done this spring as far as getting young guys ready to go compete in from game one. I think that the schedule this coming year, while you got to be very, very careful about just assuming they're going to start 5-0, because you talk about young teams and you talk about Vanderbilt. That Carolina's on a heater against those guys, and they do come to Columbia for the SEC home opener. But that team is dangerous. So young teams overall can get walloped. You got to go to Missouri. Missouri's still a pain. Oh, Carolina beat Missouri last year and snapped the streak. They're still a pain in the butt, and it's out there. I don't know what Kentucky's going to be like this year. My guess is they're not going to be as horrible as people think. But that game's at Williams-Brice, and Shane Beamer has won 3 in a row against those guys, and it's time to go on another streak against the Wildcats. Just being honest, being frank here. And then, of course, there's the opener against Virginia Tech and South Carolina State. Now, it's not murderer's row. You don't look at it like you did last year and go, my goodness, you got conference games, you got LSU, you got Ole Miss, you got Alabama right there in a row, Oklahoma. Oh, that comes in October for this coming team. So it's a little bit of a good thing that the comp, you're not sitting there starting out with LSU. Clemson has to do that, but you're not starting out with LSU and Alabama early. You get those guys, or Ole Miss or Texas A&M or somebody like that. It kind of gradually builds if you're looking at it on paper. We don't know. Missouri could be better than Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt could be better than Missouri. Virginia Tech could be good. Yeah, it's a crapshoot these days. So I think that helps, but you got to get them ready to a certain extent. So what? Yeah, we've position battles. We've gone over most of those. You know what they are. I think an overall key is stay injury free. I think that could really side rail or sidetrack the season, as we found out around here multiple times. I think just get better across the board. Captain Obvious statement there. Use the opportunity to get the young players in some pressure situations and practice as much as you can, and they'll do that, and they'll see if they sink or swim. And then there's some answers they need to find in the kicking game. I've been whistling past the graveyard on that a little bit. Like I said, did not realize they're losing their snapper and holder in addition to the kicker and punter. So they got to replace everybody else. Joe DeCamillis has a job to do to get that ready. And then we know the kicking game last year was kind of an issue compared to the rest of college football. I don't think Alex Herrera, anybody's complaining if it's 7 years ago and making a 50-plus yard field goal was 50-50 prospect at best. But you got guys nailing them for 50. I don't know what happened. Was it? I mean, are they just better at evaluating kickers in college now? Maybe something's changed and I just missed it. But nevertheless, it's a disadvantage if you can't kick long field goals now. And so there's that. I think the special teams, like coverage units and stuff, with the way they've recruited athletes, will be fine. But special teams, that's something that you need to find some. Carolina's got to find some answers, and then finally get older. Get older. You can get older by practicing against in pads against players, right? Taking reps, all that good stuff. And the good news, this was not to alarm anybody because, like I said, sometimes young team, if you're, we're young does not mean we're losing, right? And it'll be a great step for the program if they do meet expectations next season because that shows South Carolina can sustain it. They didn't just luck up. I totally reject the notion that somehow they lucked up in the portal and with some of these guys last year. I think they out evaluated everybody. I think they were smart. I think that's a winning strategy. To hell with the hype. I mean, I could care less. Uh, what a guy, like I saw some rankings. Josh Pate was talking about Rasul Faison in that situation on a video clip I saw, and I saw, well, who was the number one back in the portal? It was Justice Haynes. Who's the number two back in the portal? It was Rasul Faison, according to some portal rankings from somewhere. I'm like, well, heck, they tried for number one and got number two. I don't think either one of them's Rocket Sanders, just to be honest. And, Haynes was a 5-star and Faison was a no-star that had to go JUCO and Utah State. They're 1 and 2. So I think there's a formula for that. And I think Beamer and his staff have done a very good job of finding it. And you look at this portal class, it's not just guys from the lower level. It's guys from the upper level that are, kind of safe, somewhat. You're never totally safe. But somewhat safe picks. I mean, they didn't take Okoronkwo and Murphy. They didn't take Murphy because he was almost a 5-star out of high school. They took Murphy because they got a recommendation from Nick Saban, and that's one everybody should listen to. And I think with Justin, same way. He signed and played for DeBoer, but he was recruited by Saban and evaluated by Saban, and they wanted him. I think that's still a little cheat code you can get. So, Jordan Dingle came from Kentucky. He's a guy everybody's familiar with from playing Kentucky. Plus, he's got roots in South Carolina at tight end, and with Michael Smith missing time with injury, Dingle's a good player to get in there and show what he can do. Offensive lineman that they brought in are Wake Forest and 2 group of 5s. So, it's not all power schools, but there's more guys coming in from power schools, SEC schools, Texas A&M, Missouri, for example, than last year. But and we'll see if these guys pan out like last year's. But I don't think luck had anything to do with it. I've heard that even from Gamecock fans. Well, it's lucked up. No, the reason, like Demetrius Knight, right? Well, who's this guy from Charlotte they're taking? Well, he had 96 tackles last year at Charlotte and was all conference, but that doesn't mean you should take him. I think I would still be like, well, what does that really mean in the American? Well, they put the catapult on him. He ran 22 miles an hour. Okay, that's why you take him, because the linebackers were slow last year, right? So that's how you do it. Torricelli Simpkins, you look at him and you're like, oh my, that guy's the SEC offensive line. So anyway, so that's the deal. Just because you're young doesn't mean you have to lose, but there's some development, growing up, getting better, whatever, in the spring. Stay injury free, do all that. Hopefully we get some answers on special teams and then rock and roll hoochie coo all summer. Get that transformation going physically, and then it gets real in August. So there's that. So happy spring football practice. We'll have complete coverage on thebigspur.com also, talking about it on Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show. We have a JC and Morgan later today. Wes Durham from the SEC Network will join us, for former voice of the Falcons. I think he's still the voice of the Falcons. Georgia Tech, Dad was the voice of the Tar Heels for a long time. I think Wes was too. Anyway, Mike set this up, so we're going to have that coming up live at 9:30 a.m. and then the morning show at 10. Those will overlap with JB and Phil. And Will Crow is in on Wednesdays to do his thing, co-hosting wise, and then Phil and I will be along. I think Joe Machika is in today to talk about the women's basketball team. Joe's done some good stuff. Check out the walkthrough. He had Brad Muller on, and they always do a really good job with women's basketball. So check that out. The walkthrough was live last night, but it's right there on Chief Sports South Carolina YouTube page. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share on this channel. If you're listening on podcast, please go rate us 5 stars, write a nice review, and I'll appreciate that. All right. See you guys later today. JC Sherbert's Coffee signing off. Happy spring football practice, everyone.